We have a wonderful sustainability chapter. First of all, I'm going to put this on speaker view. We have a sustainability YouTube channel now, and this is our third program in the series, which is really wonderful. So all of our programs are going to be on the YouTube channel, and I'll be sharing that link with you in a couple of days. So if you have any friends who missed this presentation tonight, you'll have the link to share with them. I first wanted to thank our friends at the library who are sponsoring this program tonight. And a huge thank you to Joanna Hanrahan, who is the person who introduced me to Waltraud Unger, who is our speaker tonight. So I'm just so grateful for all of the amazing connections that that the library has been able to make with Joanna and Louise McMath and Michelle Tyler, and it's been really exciting. And our spreadsheet is growing and growing, and we're going to have a lot of amazing programs coming up. So Joanna, I can share your website later in the chat if you want as well.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I'm going to share Waltraud's website as well, and she'll have some more resources and social media to share. So basically, I just want to welcome her, and she is a certified integrative health coach, and she will share with her some of her background, so I'll let her do that, but she has a very interesting scientific and business background, which really informs her work with sustainability in a really unique way. So we're just so happy to have you here tonight, and look forward to hearing your presentation and having a time to talk afterwards. So welcome, Waltraud Unger.
Thank you so much, Roberta and everybody. I am just so honored and delighted to be here because this is a topic that really comes from my heart. And I've up until now always given a similar presentation in person because I love the interaction. And now we can't do that. So I really had to be creative to bring the aeroponic gardening to life through Zoom. So what you actually see before I go into the presentation, behind me is one of the units that I have in my office that I grow during the winter, and that goes outside in the summer in April, and then I grow all the way through usually end of October. But this year it's been so warm, so it literally just came in, I think 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to go into screen share and then we'll see how it goes. All right. So can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you so much again for coming today. What I would like to share with you today is a simple way to really shift how we think of our food supply, make this fun, reducing our carbon footprint, and at the same time bringing nutritious food to our family. And I'll touch on all of those points in the presentation, but what's really, really close to my heart is the second point, is nutrition, because I'm a health coach as well as love gardening, and I'll share that in a little bit. So what we are talking about tonight is how can we make sustainability part of everyday life? How can we make it easier? We'll shine a little bit of a light on the true cost of our food. What's the concept of aeroponic gardening? It's a little different from hydroponic gardening, and it's definitely different from regular, organic or dirt gardening, which I've grown up doing all my life. And then share a little bit more about how to use it and how to get started. And I was thinking about, this is the month of giving. So if you stay to the end, or if you're listening to the replay and get to the end, and if I really sparked something in you, I have a surprise that I'd like to share at the end as well. I always like to give and share surprises. So I don't know, Roberta, can you, I'm trying to see, somehow it appears that my screen is blocked. Can you see?
Oh, what is blocked?
My screen is partially blocked.
Oh,
can you see the full text?
Yeah, I have all the gallery view minimized. I just see your presentation right now.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Because it appears on my end that I see a lot of the attendees on the side.
Oh yeah, right now I'm just seeing your screen. Is that true of everybody?
The people in the class and the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so on average, the food that goes into our supermarket has traveled 1,500 miles, and it was harvested at least 5 days prior to arriving in the store. And to me, when I learned about that, it really blew my mind, because if you think about it, if it takes 5 days to even get to the supermarket, then it's probably going to take a couple days before we buy it. And then it ends up in our fridge, and we don't cook it right away. So there's quite a bit of time between harvesting and consumption. And I looked at it a little bit more from a scientific perspective. There was a study done where it showed the food that arrived at the Chicago terminal market, a wholesale market, versus a farmer's market. And it was really amazing to see how far most of our food comes from. And I'm now just looking at the food that was grown in the US, and on average, it's traveling at least coast to coast or halfway through the country, versus when we buy from a farmer's market, where the radius is usually around 100 miles, which is a lot more doable in terms of a sustainability end. And then in the green box, I highlighted all the things that I currently grow aeroponically, which means literally outside of my front door, or right now in my office. So what's the true cost of food? When it has to travel a long distance, we use a lot of fossil fuel, which also means that for every calorie that we consume, it took us 10 times as much energy or calories to produce it. So it's not really very effective. And we have gotten so used to having fresh fruit from around the world instantly here, which means we are shipping more of it via air travel versus by sea, which has then another 50 factor of 50 higher carbon dioxide emissions. So we are having a lot of a significant impact on the environment. The second part of it is what we do to the food. When we pick it unripe, which we have to do so it doesn't spoil during transport, then after transport, we are trying then to ripen it fairly quickly, which means that it's either gassed or it gets processed or irradiated or somehow manipulated with to make it stable. Often the food gets now genetically modified. I don't know what your view of it is. In my view, I'd rather consume food as close to the way nature intended it versus having men manipulate the food. I've also seen studies where the nutritional content just goes down with genetic modification. The last bullet point I wanted to highlight, and that has to do with when I look at coaching people on a nutritional side, we are trying to maximize nutrient intake. And if something is picked before it ripens, it has less nutrients, meaning less vitamins, less minerals. So if you imagine a strawberry that you buy in the supermarket, it has hardly any smell and it's very white on the inside. So that strawberry was picked unripe. When a strawberry is ripened either in your garden or from a farm, you can smell it. So about 2 days before it's at peak ripeness, you start to smell the fruit. Like the cantaloupe, we smell to make sure it's ripe, right? In that short little window, that's when you have the maximum of nutrients in the food.
Okay, I'm fully there.
But this is not when we pick it. So when we pick it unripe and then process it to make it ripen for the supermarket, we are missing that window of maximum nutrient density. And the vitamins and minerals is what our body needs to help our gene reproduce healthy, to keep the inflammation down, to slow down the aging. So there's a lot of interruption that's happening between the food that we consume and the health or the state of our health afterwards. So the closer we can bring it to harvesting when it's ripe and consuming it when we harvest it, the better for us, for our health and for the environment. So there was another study done in California that showed that within a week, we can lose up to 55% of the nutrients when it sits there before we consume it. The worst is spinach. So by the time we consume the spinach, there is hardly anything left other than the fiber that is in the produce. So with all of that in the background, I'd like to ask, what was it about the topic today that actually brought you here? So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a little break, type in the chat box, and just share what was it that interested you to come on today. And Roberta, I can't see the chat, so if there are any
Yeah, I will read them out for sure.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Marge is interested to learn more. Angela said Angela said I have a garden and just wanted to learn more about my tower garden. Eileen says, I want to learn how to grow fresh foods. Sue says, I'm looking forward to seeing how to grow the garden. Oh, we have lots of good. Kristen, prolonging growing my own food and also for elementary school garden. It might be cool to bring aeroponic gardening to school. Totally.
Absolutely, we will talk about that.
Deborah says, I just started gardening for the first time this summer. I want to learn how to grow inside during colder months. We have being home on another possible quarantine. I would like to have fresh produce. Teresa says, I started growing veggies this summer and want to grow during the winter. Another guest, I have a community garden in the summer and now I miss the veggies and would like to grow during the winter. Interesting growing veggies during the winter inside. That's a good, interesting growing edible food. I have a lot of shade. Whoops.
I can identify with that, with a lot of shade. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, all of this we will be talking about. So I took a guess what might be the reasons why you came today. So one was maybe the concern about the environment. After all, this is a sustainability series. Maybe interested in gardening and want to learn more, getting kids involved, which definitely worked with my kids, and maybe want to have a reliable access to fresh and nutritious food, or maybe all of it. So for me, those were all the reasons why I'm actually growing aeroponically right now. So whatever it is, it's a really simple process. And the photo that you see on the right-hand side was my aeroponic garden this summer that, as I said, I just brought in, I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I can't even remember. So a little bit about me. In my former life, I was a research scientist, so that's why I have all the research in there. And a little bit over 10 years ago, I decided that I had enough of contributing to somebody else's bottom line. I went back to school for nutrition and coaching and have been doing that since full time, but I also have a huge passion for gardening. I'm a local mom. I'm in Glen Rock. I have 3 teenagers / young adults at this point. And I really love sharing my knowledge in workshops, in presentations, whatever. So these are a few of the photos. This was when I harvested the Swiss chard, and maybe it can give you the perspective how ginormous just one bunch of Swiss chard was that I harvested. On the top right is actually my son in my mother's garden. So what ignited that love for gardening was the way I grew up. I grew up in Germany. You probably can hear that on my accent. We had a vegetable garden, I would say about 1,500 square feet. And besides that, multiple fruit trees, plums, apples, cherries. We have a greenhouse that my father somehow managed to heat from our furnace in the house. We would go foraging. So growing food and eating with the season was the way I grew up. When I came to the US and I moved to Glen Rock, I love all the big trees that we have. We have oak trees, we have maple trees, but I don't have sun to grow. So I have about 4 raised beds and they are sort of limping along, but it was not until I heard about aeroponic gardening by now almost 8 years ago that I was able to really start growing again and eating again the way I grew up with. So the center photo is actually a photo with me and the principal at Hamilton School in Glen Rock. They started a program and a club last year. And on the bottom, I'm teaching a group of kids where our food comes from. And that's always exciting to see what they think where food comes from. It's not always what we know actually happens. So in order to really control the food that we eat, we have some options, but we have to be a lot closer to where it's grown. So we can do that through farmers markets, and we have some great ones in the area, but they are seasonal. A CSA, community supported agriculture, is also seasonal. Growing your own, the same thing, but aeroponic gardening allowed me to do it year round. So what is one thing, I want you to just think for 1 second, what can you do to actually connect yourself to really fresh produce, to bring that a little bit closer to you? Or what are you already doing? Maybe it's the better question. So if you want to just share in the chat, that would be amazing. So I don't know.
Okay, we have a farmers markets, join a CSA. Another person I buy into a CSA in Mawa, NJ Mevo, MEVO, great fresh produce the day it's picked. We have frequent farmers markets, personal garden and farmers market. I started going to the Ramsey farmers market for fresh produce and look forward to begin growing at home. I did raise a bed gardening and also used Earthbox this summer. A few people have a Misfits subscription. I gardened my veggies in the summer. I brought in my chives indoors and it's growing well inside. We drive to Patterson from Teaneck during the year where there are farmers markets from local farms. The food is fresh and less expensive.
Yeah. So before I got into growing aeroponically, we did a CSA, community supported agriculture. I still love the Ramsey Farmers Market. As I said, I have my raised beds. So I like to draw in from all those areas, but most of my, especially greens, herbs, and in the summer, my summer vegetables come now from the tower. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what we choose. What's really important, what matters for us and for the environment, is that we make a commitment to really think about where our food comes from. So if you look at the planting guide for New Jersey, and depending where you are, you're probably in a zone 6 or zone 7. So Glen Rock is a little bit more zone 6, but along the Hudson and then down South Jersey, we are more in a zone 7. And there's a little difference, but what you will see is there is not a whole lot available before April, and by the end of October, harvesting is pretty much done. We may get an extra week or 2 in November like we did this year, but most of it is done. We only have then access to the root vegetables or whatever we grow indoors or we get from greenhouses. So when I look at growing aeroponically, these are all the different things that I can grow year round. And some of the things that I absolutely love is my leafy greens, like my kale, my Swiss chard. I do a ton of lettuce, and I'll show some pictures later. I do my herbs, which are amazing. And what I love is the depth of flavor. If you like greens, for example, like arugula, it has a very deep flavor profile to it that you can't find in a supermarket. Sometimes you can find it at a farmer's market, depending how the farmer grew it. But it just brings out the natural flavor a lot more. And there was something that was really funny was one year, I mentioned already that I like to play scientist. I used the same seeds, and my favorite tomato seeds, I don't know if you can see them, are the Cherokee Purple. I either grow them as a regular size or the cherry. size. I had the same ones in my raised beds, in pots, and in my tower garden. And my son loves tomatoes, and they always pick the little cherry ones off the vine. And he asked me, it was I think about 2 years ago, he said, "Mom, what's different about the one from the tower? It tastes so much better." And it was amazing to see that even as a child, he realized that the flavor was very different, very much more intense. And we'll see later on why this happens. So what is it? It's actually a vertical aeroponic growing system. It uses all natural earth mineral growing tonic. And it was developed at Epcot by a scientist named Tim Blank, who has really made a name for himself in that whole industry. And it's been on the market, I would say, about 10 years. So I have been growing for 7 years now, I believe. And these are just a few pictures. The top ones are from friends. And the bottom one, my husband snapped a photo one morning. I had just come out of the shower, wanted to make my morning green smoothie. And I was just amazed how big the kale has gotten. So of course, he's a photographer. He always has a camera. And I thought it was fun to just show that this has become such an integral part of our life. What I love about it is that it uses so little water. So 98% less water, and I can attest to that. Space is very limited. As I said, I have very little sun. I have him on my front porch. So if you have an outdoor tower, if you have an area 3 feet by 3 feet, that's all you need. A lot more yield because it grows quite fast, and it's just more prolific. And I would like to show you within 4 weeks how it actually grows. So I hope you can see this. So depending what you grow and how you arrange it, some of the towers can be absolutely stunning. So this is my tower, and that's a journey through the year. On the very left is an image of when I started. I put the seedlings in the ports. So this unit is a standard unit that has 20 ports. And 2 weeks later, same tower, you can see the growth that I've had. I can't do a time lapse yet. Maybe I'll talk my husband into setting something up. But I had just moved it out of the corner of the patio towards the edge because I had a little bit more sun towards the edge. And that was around, I would say, April. And then the center picture is the identical tower, but that image was taken probably at the end of May, just guessing by the size of the zucchini and the tomatoes. They are still fairly small, but all my lettuce has grown in nicely. My Boston lettuce was ready to harvest. You can see the kale and the Swiss chard on top, and the herbs probably were on the other side because I can't really see them here. And then on the very right is a tower at the end of the winter season. So it has some empty ports already that I harvested off. The plants on top, the kale, the Swiss chard is fairly small because I keep picking continuously, and I have some other herbs. So it's fairly naked for indoor growing, but that was at the end of the growing season. This was from the summer. You can see the difference. Again, the size and the depth of the color of the leafy greens. We had an abundance of zucchini and zucchini flowers. And then on the very right, that's the Cherokee purple heirloom. So it's not a bad tomato. It's just, it gets this beautiful purple stripe and it just has a delicious flavor. This is what my tower looks like in the winter. So I focus then on leafy greens and herbs. Some people grow tomatoes inside and zucchini. I have some in New York City in an apartment. They grow indoors year round. They pollinate. I'm honestly too lazy to hand pollinate. And for anything that has flowers, to produce fruit, you need to pollinate. So I don't mess with that during the winter. I just focus on my greens, on my herbs. And then in the summer, I do the zucchini, the cucumbers, the tomatoes, that kind of stuff. So this is how the tower actually works. So let's start that video. Oh, here we go.
Tower Garden's state-of-the-art aeroponic vertical garden system uses both water and air to produce more colorful, better tasting, and incredibly nutritious fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Tower Garden has a 20-gallon reservoir at its base that stores the Tower Tonic nutrient solution. Developed by experts in plant and human nutrition, Tower Tonic Mineral Blend enables superior plant growth and better nutrition from your Tower Garden produce. The process begins once the seedlings have been placed in your tower garden. Here they will be nourished with Tower Tonic nutrient solution. Inside the reservoir is a small, low-wattage submersible pump. The pump pushes the nutrient solution up through the tower to the top. From there, the nutrient solution drips through the central tower using a special device that evenly cascades the solution over the exposed plant roots. On the journey down the tower, the nutrient solution feeds the roots and becomes highly oxygenated as it cascades gently down the reservoir. This process is continuous, providing fresh oxygen, water, and nutrients to the roots of the plants. This patented aeroponic process enables food crops to grow faster than they would in soil, so they can be harvested more often.
Okay, so normally I like to show that on the tower if we are in person, because it's really cool to see, but I hope that this little video clip kind of gave you an idea how the tower works, and I can show you the ports and the rock wool where the seeds go in later on as well. So you can really grow anywhere. I already mentioned indoors, on patios, balconies. A lot of people have integrated it into their landscape because it has a different way of growing than if you do it in the soil. And then there are truly tower garden farms at this point, especially out west. We have a number of them in California, up the West Coast, Colorado, Arizona. And with the drought situation and the heat, it's really a nice way of growing because it uses so little water. They're becoming very popular. We've had for a number of years now, an installation at O'Hare Airport, where I believe they have 60 or 80 towers, and all of the food vendors at O'Hare Airport get their produce from a farm that's in Terminal C. Then besides you know, the home use, if you will, you can do community gardens. We have them in restaurants. There is a restaurant in Ridgewood. There's a restaurant in Hohokus that uses it, not to the extent that they have a larger installation where all of their produce is supplied from towers, but they have smaller herbs and stuff that they use in their cuisine. We have them at workplace cafes, at hospitals, schools, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a second. But I wanted to show what's possible, and maybe that sparks some ideas where you could see them in your area. So these are my school gardens, or at least a few pictures of the school gardens. On the left is a special ed classroom where we brought in a tower, and the kids absolutely loved it. One kid one day said, when I go in once a year in the beginning of the school year with a new class to walk them through, answer questions, and get them started. And this one kid was in the classroom for the second year, and she says, oh, Mrs. Unger, you're like sunshine. Thank you for coming back. And that just melted my heart because it means so much to them. And I heard from the teacher that the kids absolutely embrace it. We have a ton of lesson plans already that can be brought into it, and they use it for math, they use it science, art, and they really live with the tower. And it's just so amazing to see. And then again, an image from Hamilton School. I actually meant to switch that out. because I had it earlier, but I guess I didn't. So forgive me for that. And then on the bottom, just love doing the kids workshop. This one was at the Glenrock Arboretum, homeschooling. We have families come together and I run a workshop with them. And it's just so much fun to share with kids. So by this point, you probably wonder, what is it? So there are two systems, and they can be modified depending on what you want to grow and where you want to place it. So I'm not going too much into it, but it pretty much comes complete with everything. The Flex is the one that I have. It's a little larger in a dimension. The big difference is that this one has 20 gallons. Then we have a smaller one that's called Home that has 13-gallon reservoir. Otherwise, they're fairly similar. So this is the Home one. It's a little bit more compact, that you cannot bring outside. This is strictly for indoor growing, while the Flex, this one, you can do indoors and outdoors. And then, so you might have some thoughts that as you listen, can anybody do that? And it's so simple. I can't even begin to tell you, because it really does the work by itself. Everything is on timers. It's all natural. Kids do it. My kids did it in the first couple of years. They loved it. Now that's kind of like part of the family and they don't pay too much attention. But for a number of years, my kids just took care of it. They loved it. In terms of space, will you have enough space? So the first year we had it in our living room, and it replaced a club chair. And since then, I've kind of claimed it for myself because I really want to have it in my office. I love the sun spectrum. It's behind me right now, but I turned it off because it interferes with the lights with the presentation. But I love it because the lights have sun spectrum and I don't get that seasonal dip in the winter because I do have the exposure to sun. You have already a garden. Does it make sense? Yes, especially if you want to grow in the winter as well. And as I said, I have quite a number of people that I work with that have integrated it with raised beds and boxes. So it's, it's just a different way of growing. What happens when you travel? So that's the best part because you really don't need to take care of it. Indoors, when you grow primarily greens, they don't need a lot of water. A reservoir may, the 20-gallon reservoir, you probably don't have to fill for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on the size of your plants. And the lights and the pump all runs on a timer. It's all self-sufficient. In the summer, when we are in August and it's brutally hot and you're growing zucchini, tomatoes, and cucumber who are really thirsty, then you probably have to fill the reservoir every 5 to 7 days, maybe 4 if it's really hot. So when we travel, I ask a neighbor to take a look at it, make sure halfway through the week that the reservoir is filled up. So the cost for us, we recuperate, or what's the word for it? We made up for the investment within 6 months of having it. So we bought ours on a installment plan, which makes no difference if you pay in full or installment. There's no extra that way. So we chose to spread it out. And in 6 months, we've saved enough money from not having to buy produce that paid for the tower garden. So depending on the configuration, it varies if you need the lights, if you don't need the lights, like if you grow outside, you don't need lights. And how long does it take from start till harvest? It's about 4 weeks. So I'll show you some photos from this morning that I took from my tower. Probably in another week, I can start harvesting. So these are photos I took this morning from the tower behind me. I have 4 different types of lettuce. The red cross and the flashy trout, they're actually speckled. So it's not that there's something wrong with the lettuce. It just gets very speckled, beautiful maroon red. And I can most likely, what's today? Wednesday. Next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can start picking some leaves already for a salad. Basil also has grown very quickly. Probably another week, week and a half, I can start harvesting some basil. I have some chives where I took seeds from my outdoor plant because I got tired of having to freeze it in the winter. So this year I'm growing it in my tower garden. And then I made a little video to kind of bring what's behind me a little closer to you. So this is the cilantro. It's still fairly small, but it has developed quite a number of leaves. This is the chive again. And then parsley. This was just the tomato cage going by. I have mesclun in there. Here is, God, what's that? That's another variety of lettuce, I forget. And then my Swiss chard. So that gives you a little bit of an idea what's growing behind me without me running through the room here. And then this is a close-up. I have been growing wintertime, and that's super slow to sprout, but it also shows you a close-up of what's actually in a port. So the sprout, that's again what it looked like this morning. You can see the shell of the seed still on the sprout. So it's really a baby. The seed go inside that rock wool. You add a little bit of vermiculite to keep it secure and dark until it sprouts. And then you have the rock wool on the outside. And I'm going to show you that later on when I turn off the screen share. That is lava rock that feels, kind of scratchy wool is the best way to describe it. And that goes in the compost at the end of the growing season, if there's anything left. And what I mean by that is the roots sometimes just absorb it. So thank you for staying. What I wanted to offer, because I really love doing that. If you have any questions, I'm going to show my contact information. Reach out. I'd love to help you get set up with something that works for you based on what you want to grow and your situation. And then we put together a cookbook of recipes specifically from the produce that you can grow in a growing tower. And then just at the very end, if Roberta, if you want to put that in the chat for me, that would be amazing. Yeah. My cell phone. So text works a lot better than email for me. Email kind of gets lost sometimes, but text I always get. But of course you can email me as well. And then on Facebook, I gave you both of my pages. The Unfolding You is my coaching Facebook page. My gardening one is my year-round gardening, but there is more activity on Instagram. If you want to see what has been growing, I started in the spring, so it's a fairly new page. I haven't been all that consistent, but it will give you an overview of what happened during this growing season. And then just the website to take a look at the gardens and the resources and all that at the very end. So I'm going to stop the screen share.
I have a couple questions in the chat.
Great.
I will read it. First of all, thank you for those great graphics, the videos. That was so, like, to me, it just resonates a lot more when I can see it all happening, especially with the garden and the hydration system. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and it's so hard to do when you can't be close up and can open it up and show it. So the rock wool is actually just a little cube. And in there you put usually 2 seeds, 1 seed, depending what it is that you want to grow, a little bit of vermiculite on it. These are the baskets that go into the port. So they fit in there. This one I haven't washed yet. I just took it out from my other tower and they sit in there. And what happens is then the water trickles on the rock wool. This eventually will fill out with roots and they hang inside the tower. So they get direct access to the nutrient solution. And that's what makes it grow so fast because it has everything that the plant needs right then and there.
Okay, great. So I'll read a few of the questions. You might have touched on this a little bit. Does chilly or hot temperatures affect the growth? Is it basically the same as growing outside, or is there a little bit of a difference?
There is a little bit of a difference, and I'm laughing because this year I was very eager to get started, and you will see a funny video on my Instagram where we had a couple, I think it was 2 weeks of warm weather, and I got so eager. I took my tower, put it outside, got it going, and then we had 2 or 3 days of frost, which meant we ended up wrapping it in a moving blanket because my seedlings were smaller than the ones that I shared with you in the presentation, and I wasn't about to lose it. So we were putting a fleece over it and a moving blanket, and that got us through the 3 days of frost. But because it stayed cold, it also delayed the growth, just like it did in the rest of the garden. But as soon as it started warming up, that's when the tower kicked in and then grew faster,
Okay.
which I've seen consistently over the years that it grows faster. But when it gets really cold, it just stops growth, like with everything else.
Okay. Question about the Flex. Is there any reason why the Flex is less expensive than the home model?
Actually, by the time you add everything to make it compatible, I think the difference is like $20, $30. So it's really not that much of a difference. The base kit without the lights and without the dolly, yes, it's cheaper. But what I found, and I'm just gonna be straight, the first year I didn't buy the dolly that actually was designed for the Flex system. I got something from a gardening store. It cost me $10 less, and the whole thing wobbled. So the following year, I finally got the appropriate dolly. So by the time you add the dolly, and then in the winter I added the lights, it's pretty much the same price. It's just that it's bigger and more flexible. But if you don't have the space, if you live in a small apartment, the home makes a lot more sense.
Great. Question about the lettuces. Do the lettuces, are they as crunchy when you grow indoors?
Not as much, because actually what makes lettuce crunchy is air circulation. So the more wind you have, the sturdier the plant gets. So indoors, they are not quite as crunchy. I have some people that prefer crunchy lettuce, so they would run a fan. Way too much effort for me. I'm like, it has to be simple. And they have more of a delicate, more of like a masculine type crunch than like a butterhead.
Great. Just a comment, one of our guests says, my chives are growing great inside. That's good news. What kind of lights are needed for indoor growing?
So the lights that are with the unit, they are sun spectrum lights. So right now I have the fluorescent lights. That was the original model. We now have LED that are even better, but I haven't put them up.
Mhm.
So what I would recommend is going with the original ones, because they fit perfectly on top of the tower, and it has the perfect spectrum for optimal plant growth. So those LED lights, we've had success with eggplants and tomatoes indoors, which I find amazing.
I think this was in your video. How much water when you start the tower?
So the Flex has a 20-gallon tank, and then the home has a 13-gallon tank.
Mhm. Okay. What about bugs? And then the second part of the question, what is the cost of the unit and the growing materials? I know you covered some of that, but we'll start with the bugs.
Okay. With the bugs, I find that I have a lot less issue with it than in a raised bed, because the plants are healthier. So they are less likely to actually have aphids or spider mites or any of that, because the plant itself is a healthier plant. I don't know if it makes sense, but that's what we have been told, and that's what I see. I've actually tested it. I did a couple of years ago. I stretched a tonic and had it for a month just running on water, and I could see the stress on the plants. And that's when I started to see spider mites. But when you just keep them fertilized per the schedule, there's no issue. It's beautiful. Outdoors, I've had a number of times issues with caterpillar, because they love the kale, but I have it just as much in my raised beds. So I don't think it's a tower issue. It's just they love kale.
Mhm.
So you deal with it that way. But in terms of other pests like chipmunks or deer or anything, they don't go near. And I think it has to do with the pump coming up. So the pump starts up every 45 minutes, And I think it just scares them away.
Okay.
And eventually they just stay away.
Oh, see that, yeah, we had a few questions about that. So squirrels and chipmunk, all of the, that would impact all of the animals. Good.
Yeah.
How different is the nutrient tonic from a plant grown organically? And is the nutrient tonic organic?
Organic applies that you actually grow in soil. So we have to be careful when we use the word organic. However, with that said, everything that is used is of natural origin. So what I mean is the rock wool actually is rock, and the tonic, the minerals come from rock quarries. So they're not your typical chemical fertilizer. They are a natural fertilizer, but we can't call it organic because definition of the word implies that you have soil, and we don't have soil.
Okay.
If that answers the question.
Is it too cold for the tower to stay in the garage?
It depends. It depends on what you grow and how cold your garage gets. So I have at least one customer, I don't know if my other customer is going to do it in the garage. They grow strawberries in the garage, and it's warm enough that it doesn't freeze, and it's fine. If you would do spinach and let's say kale and Swiss chard that are a little hardier, or Brussels sprouts or broccoli, crop that is good with cold temperatures, then you can absolutely do it as long as the unit doesn't freeze. So if it's above freezing, you're fine in the garage.
Okay. Where can you buy the seeds, and do you prefer a certain brand?
I buy my seeds wherever I find good seeds. And with that, I mean, I'm already going through the effort of growing my own. I prefer heirloom seeds, or at least organic or non-GMO. So before COVID, Whole Foods still carried organic seeds. So sometimes if I saw something there, I would buy it. I've ordered a lot of seeds from Johnny Seeds or the Seed Exchange. I save a lot of my seeds. So like the chive that you saw and the basil are my own seeds. I have holy basil where I save my seeds. I have friends. We do a little seed exchange. So you can really use anything. But if you had to buy, my favorites have always been either a quick Whole Foods or then Johnny Seeds or Seed Exchange.
Actually, that's a fun idea. I have friends who do a cookie exchange at the holidays, and that'd be really fun to have a seed exchange.
Yeah, it's really cool because you get to mix different varieties. Like if you buy an envelope, let's say of tomatoes, there's so many seeds in there, you can never use them. You need 2 tomato plants and that'll feed you all summer. So I buy the Cherokee Purple, another friend buys another one. She gives me, 5 seeds. I give her 5 seeds and we're both happy.
Okay. I think I want to make sure I got everyone's questions. Do we have any more questions? You can put it in the chat, or if you wanted to ask out loud, that's fine too. Oh, how long do seeds last?
So technically we would say buy fresh seeds every year. So that's the official answer. Buying fresh seeds, new seeds every year.
Okay.
However, I have used seeds that were 5-6 years old. It really depends how you keep them. They may not sprout as readily as if they are fresh seeds. But yeah, 2-3 years, if you keep them somewhat cold and dry, you're good.
And the cost for, just ballpark for some of the, for the seeds?
For the seeds, $2, $3. So yeah, I never answered the question about how much does it cost. And I apologize for that. So a unit, a base unit is around $600. By the time you add the lights and the dolly, it can go up to 900, maybe 1,000, depending on the configuration. When I started, it was $650. We had it paid off in 6 months based on what we saved. The beautiful thing is once the unit is paid for, meaning you've recouped your investment, what you spend every year is so negligible. We haven't noticed any increase in water. We haven't noticed any increase in electricity. And to buy the seeds, the rock wool, which is a consumable, and the tonic is about $80 a year. So it's practically free once the unit is paid for. So my units, my first one, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, is long paid off.
That's great.
Yeah, and there's no like repair or anything. I had once in a while, customers mentioned that they had some pump issues, and we just replaced them at no cost. So
Yeah.
it's really efficient once you have it.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a chard question. When I grow chard in the ground, I keep cutting leaves from March through December. How long can you keep a chard plant? For example, can it stay in a port?
That's a great question. Technically, it eventually gets so big that you want to take it out. So the longest I have kept a chard in a port was 9 months. I started it in December and then took it outside with me because it was beautiful. I didn't want to start it again, and had it then outside until November. Normally what I do is I give it 6 months. So I start up in April and then go till October, give or take, clean out the tower, and then start fresh again. And with that, all fresh new plants.
This question kind of connects there. How heavy is the tower? Is it easy to move in and out? How much
Yes.
does it weigh?
Yes. So when it's empty, I can easily carry it by myself. We have transported it actually. Before I had a show tower, I would bring my own tower to events. So that means with plants and water and all of it. So what we would do is we would drain the reservoir or bring it down to a very low level. And then between my husband and myself, we were able to transport it and then just add the liquid, the water at the end again. So when it's really full, it's hard to lift, but it's really the weight of the water. When there's no water in it, I can pick it up. Not a big deal.
Like if you have a child who plays the harp and you have to somehow get that in your car every time.
Something like this, yes.
Except for the water. Oh, that's funny. So good questions. Any other questions? I love that you're making it just seems so accessible. Like it just doesn't seem as overwhelming, as you might think.
Thank you. It is really simple. And I think it's still a lot more overwhelming presenting it than actually seeing it.
Yeah.
So I don't have to touch the tower at all now other than harvesting, which is great because how often does it happen that you need some herbs, let's say,
Right.
You buy some parsley or dill or whatever, you need a couple sprigs and the rest you forget that it's in the fridge. And then you find it 4 weeks later and it's all mush. I mean, we've all done it, right? And now I have it in there and I just pick whatever I want and I don't have to think about, oh, I want some cilantro for my tacos right now. Oh, parsley would be nice. I just go and harvest it. And as long as you pick from the outside and the center stays, it just keeps growing and growing. And that's what I do with the lettuce. And maybe I need to replace the lettuce 3 months later because it starts bolting. But other than that, you just pick it. It's really simple, a lot simpler than dirt gardening.
And if it rains, especially I'm thinking of a rain like yesterday, you need to make any adjustments for the outdoor one?
No, you wouldn't do it with your raised bed either.
Oh, okay.
We had a couple years, we had a pretty bad hailstorm and it was outside. Yes, there was some damage on the plants, but they were all over the garden and I didn't see the need to protect it. I just let nature do its thing and it was fine.
For your schoolwork, have any of the schools received grant funding to purchase one of these units, perhaps through Sustainable New Jersey Schools?
Yes, some schools have gotten grant money. Some schools have paid for it through their parent association, the PTA or HSA. Some schools have paid from a budget that they had, like in the special ed classroom. It depends on the school, honestly. Some people, in some schools, it was really easy. And some schools, it's a little bit more bureaucratic.
If you start to grow now, will it last until the spring? And then you put it outside?
Yes.
And then here's a great question. Do you have to clean the tower between seasons?
Yes, I really like to do that. I have clients, I have to admit, that don't, but I really don't advise it because it is a living matter, and eventually some roots will get loose or some rock will falls in, and it just, the water is still clean, but you want to keep the pump clean. So, and if there's anything, I'm crazy that way. I want to know that it's clean. So I harvest it all up. It gives me a chance to start fresh, and all I use is dish soap to clean it. Sometimes, especially if you have rich with water, we have a lot of calcium in the water. So you'll have a little bit of that build up. And the unit comes with an acid or base to adjust the pH in the water, which with rich with water, we've never had an issue. So I use a little bit of the acid pH adjuster, put all the pieces in, let it sit overnight. The next morning, it looks like new. It just dissolves everything, and then I rinse it off and put it back together. And it takes about 15 minutes to build.
Oh, wow.
That's it. And there's a funny video of me building it in the spring on Instagram if you want to see me in my raggedy jeans doing it.
Is the rock reusable?
Technically, yes. So let's say, I mentioned before that I use some old seeds sometimes. If they don't sprout, then I reuse the rock wool. But if they sprout and the plant grows, eventually the root starts to totally embrace the rock wool. So at that point, you can't separate the root from the rock wool. But 100 pieces of rock wool are less than $20.
Wow. Yeah.
And I just put it in my compost. It completely decomposes.
Right. Right. Okay. I did put your the website in the chat and your cell. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to send everybody the link to this this program on our sustainability or Ridgewood Sustainable Series website, Ridgewood Public Library on YouTube. So I'll send that to you and in the next few days, and then I'll include your contact information again. But I just want to thank you so much. This was so informative and fun and accessible. I just think you've done a beautiful presentation, and I'm glad that you're going to be on the road. And oh, and then Joanna, I'm going to just please take a look in the chat. Joanna is actually, you're kind of launching it now, sustainableridgewood.org. It's a phenomenal website, and it'll officially launch in January 2021. But there's amazing resources, and it'll connect with all of our efforts in town and beyond. So Joanna's going to have a huge forum for herself once it gets up and running. I'd love for her to have a chance to share that with all of you in the future. So just put that in your on your menu bar. And thank you all for coming. Each and every one of you. It's just so encouraging that there's so many people who are just so dedicated to all of the different sustainability issues that we're trying to cover in this series. It's just such a great way to end this year, a challenging year, and start the next one. So just thank you so much for your time and putting together such a beautiful presentation, and this wonderful audience for excellent questions, and just such a gain for everyone. And we just look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Let's hope so. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. And it's been such an honor and so much fun. So I hope I was able to share a little bit how much I enjoy it. And it's just so amazing to get people involved and connect them closer to the food, because not everybody has access to a garden or knows how to do it. And this is just such an easy way. It's different, but it's just so much fun.
Exactly.
So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, everyone. We hope to see you soon, and look out for an email in the next few days. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.